I am deeply proud as a Dubliner to be here to open this exhibition. As a child, as a Dublin child, and I'm sure maybe as an Irish child, we all had the experience, standing just a few yards on the other side of that wall, your father pointing at the pears, look at that bullet hole. And very seriously now, or you'd come in here, and the sense, remember what it must have been like for a young man of 19 or 20, 1916, looking outside. Are they coming or what's happening? And that's in your mind. Here we are in the widest street in the world. We're always told. This historic building in our nation's psyche. I am really honoured to be here with the British Ambassador. And there's not even ghost of an implication of any that historical legacy. We can take a wry look in some way at that history together without any sense of it being something that divides us. It's something that we actually share. I am honoured to open this exhibition because it tells the history of ourselves as a people. I understand, Donald, it was mentioned earlier on, that An Post as a kind of as a single entity effectively would have been established by Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell. The concern he had at the time about what private sector forces might do if you had an independent. But this exhibition leads us through the history of our country. I mean, communication systems are as close to us as anything in terms of how our society works, in terms of how we've developed as a country. One of my heroes in history in this country was Bianconi, who's celebrated inside. He was kind of like the Ryanair of his day, slightly different ethos though. Actually set up in the basis we should really help those poor people get up off walking along the streets and actually give them a piece of transport that makes them feel like royalty. And he worked with An Post, or An Post variety of its day. That sort of detail is explained here. The more recent history of our state, there's drawers inside. I had a chance to visit the exhibition on Wednesday and to go through it. I loved it. You know, it's another step from standing outside looking at the pillars with the bullet holes to standing inside looking, thinking these windows must have seen bullets coming through, to actually go in your own personal way. It suits a personal, individual visit. And pulling out the drawers of stamps and looking at those first stamps in the history of the state. Drawn with Russian-like characters, Hurley's on the rise as a new state was born, marching forward. Stamps that for 20 or 30 years, the first 30 or 40 years of the history of the state, had that slightly kind of washed look that my father reminds me existed. He said he was amazed in the 1940s, he met an American, and the colourful tie that they wore shook him. And I look at those stamps from the 60s that I remember as if they were yesterday. The cow and the insignia from the Book of Kells. And the colour of them. You can almost see the country opening up. You can see confidence coming to our country as you go from the kind of slightly sepia-coloured stamps of the early days to those lurid, big sideburns and flares stamps of the early 60s, or late 60s and early 70s. And today then a plethora of stamps, this fantastic use of electronic communications technology. So it's like a big iPhone inside. You can tap and pull stamps up and move them around. And it says something about us today as a people, as a country. It's our history set out inside. This building is of huge importance to us. And I think it will continue to evolve. I visited Donal and the team here 3 months ago when we were looking at the issue about the Abbey moving in here. And I think it would be a very good development. I think it would. This is our best building. This is right in the heart of the city. What a stage. But I said to Donal at the time, and I believe it to be true, if that does happen, and if we can get the funding and so on for it, we should also keep it as a post office. My father, and I say this quietly now, and both my grandfathers were bank managers. I always... Don't write that. But I always remember that kind of sense you had as a younger man again when you'd visit your father's office, and my mother's. And it was full of rubber bands and stamps and the things you put on top of your finger to count money, which was very important and serious. And it just had an air about it that was intriguing. I think it would be intriguing to go to the theatre through this alleyway of stands and cashier desks and everyday business transactions of our city. You know, this is a city that celebrates the individual wandering around, the interior monologue going on the old granny who pulls her trolley behind her to cash in her pension book, or the young men outside who are part of the characters of this city, the kind of what makes the sense of what the city is. So let's keep that as we develop and put our historical theatre in here. Yes, definitely. But let's keep it as a post office, because as a post office, it's a celebration for us, of us as ordinary, everyday working people. Lastly, there's a lot of talk about state assets at the present time. Going back to Cromwellian consideration of what's the best thing to do. Can I say one thing? Firstly, we are confident now as a people in the public service as well as in the private sector that competition is actually good. We're going to have to, with the new directives coming from Europe, open up our postal system to more competition. And I think that's very healthy, and it's something that actually the post office can and will thrive in as a publicly owned institution. I don't think that there's a private sector good, public sector bad ethos in this country. I don't think it's the reality of how we work. We work well and badly in equal measure in probably a whole range of different companies in different circumstances, depending on how good our management is. And in Post we have a very good management, I believe, at the present time, and it's well chaired by John Fitzgerald and his board. So I go in and talk to Colin McCarthy and Alan Matthews and the officials from finance on the basis of listening to what everyone has to say, but with a clear understanding that actually we can, in the public service, provide a really good service to the Irish people. And we have to be careful at how we damage or change institutions that are delivering, in Pust's case, 3 million transactions every day. And we have to do them quicker and better and faster. The interesting thing about this exhibition, as I said earlier on, is that it takes new technology into the heart of the exhibition. You've really good graphics, really good use of new video and other technology to explain the story of postal services in our country. So we need to do the same thing, and we are doing the same thing in our postal system, to embrace new technology, to do things differently in a competitive market in public service. And we have nothing to fear by taking that approach. It is the next step forward in our history. It is the next step forward in the technological evolution which is set out in this excellent exhibition. But I want to thank people, and as I said, this is a brilliant addition now to our city, a reason to visit, to spend your own time. It's only €2 in. It's a time for coming back again and actually dipping into what's a hugely important resource and tells a hugely important story about communications in our society among our people. I want to commend on Post for developing it, for Martello for designing it and helping deliver it. And I look forward to going back again myself as a Dubliner and as an Irishman in my favourite capital city. Thank you.